Thank you very much. So I guess I'm between you and cocktails, so I'm going to go pretty quick, not hold you back a little bit. I can't help but comment on the earlier presentation. I thought it was fascinating because I joined IBM in '92, and I wasn't wedded to the old culture, but about a year into the company, I turned in my resignation. But then my manager talked me out of it, and a lot of it was because Gerstner was coming in, and he goes, look, the culture is going to go through dramatic change, stick around. And I'm glad I did because at the end of the day, culture, without a doubt, is what makes companies succeed or fail. But I'll tell you, there's one other aspect of it, which is leadership. Leadership, because I was there when Lou was actually giving his last talk to senior leadership team about 10 years later, and he walked through all the decisions he made. And it made me realize that in retrospect, everything looked like, that's an obvious decision, but at the time he made them, it wasn't. And so I think that's another aspect. And just one other point I want to make, which I think ties into the topic that I want to get into, which is this whole focus on customer centricity and client centricity, which is, I was the vice president of Linux strategy back in 2000. That was my first VP post, and I was pretty excited about it, but it was very disruptive technology that we were thinking of embracing or not embracing, and I got a chance to go talk to Lou about it, and immediately in 5 minutes, why the hell would I want to do this, right? It's free, some yahoos, I don't know who's, banks are not going to buy this, who's going to support all these other things? 15 minutes into it, he says, man, I love this. From a strategic perspective, he goes, this is right on, I really love this, right? And one of the things that I've noticed about IBM, because of what we went through in the 80s and the 90s, is this belief that I've had two CEOs share with me now, which is, at the end of the day, we're all placing bets on technology trends. Some of them pan out, some of them don't. And the mindset that a lot of us have cultivated inside of IBM is if a trend is going to deliver economic benefit to customers, it's going to happen whether you like it or not. So you might as well work your business model around the new trend and play to win, because playing catch up really sucks. And the other thing is a lot of these companies didn't embrace the new because of the impact it was going to have on their existing business model. So that's the other thing. Keep in mind is client centricity is absolutely critical. That's the world we're moving in. To set a little bit of the context, more people have cell phones than running water in the world. And by the way, the other interesting thing is 90% of people have the phone within their arm's reach 24 hours a day. The number of times we check our phones, which drives my wife crazy because I do that a lot, is 150. Right? Phones are becoming a very important part of our lives. I like this stat. By 2020, there could be more megabytes of digital data than grains of sand on Earth. We're almost living in a world where we've got too much data. Trying to find that signal with all that noise, that's a real challenge. And I'll talk about how that is being relevant in the world of marketing and CMOs. 2 billion social connections happen daily on the internet. So look, there's a new era that has arrived. And I'm sure you've heard this sort of theme over and over again over the course of the day, which is customers are now in control of the brand. They're engaging, you need to engage with them instead of like one-way advertisements. You need to engage with them, deliver consistent experiences across all the touch points they have with the brand. It's a new world we're living in, and I'm going to double-click a little bit on what are some of the clients doing to deal with this, what is IBM doing in this space, and it should be interesting. All right, so balance of power is shifting. So we talk to, we do a lot of surveys, and I'll share some of these studies with you and some of the findings. Now, when we look at measure of strategic influence, does anyone want to sort of guess which constituent has the most influence on the strategic, strategy of a company? Any guesses? All right, how about C-suite? That's what you would expect, CEO, Chief Strategy Officer, Chief Marketing Officer. Number 2 is customers. More and more, if you start talking to senior executives in companies, they're basically saying the constituent that is impacting what I do with resource allocation with my strategies are customers, and then very often engaging customers and even coming up with new ideas with a lot of co-creation that's taking place. And if you look at the trends, the importance of the customer constituent is going to continue to increase. Another interesting stat here is we look at companies that are underperformers and outperformers. And you can use a variety of different metrics to measure that. The one we used was revenue growth, market cap growth. And what you see is 47% of the outperformers felt that they were doing a pretty good job of understanding their customers and delivering personalized experiences every touch point. Only 29% of the underperformers were doing that. So there's some correlation here. The more customer-centric an organization becomes, the better results follow. Now, some of the other things is customers don't always do what we expect them to do. And one of the things is we bought SPSS, a company that does predictive analytics, back in 2009. And I ran that for 2 years, and that was a great experience for me because before that, I was the chief marketing officer worldwide for Lenovo and also the head of e-commerce for them. And this is the space that I used to keep thinking about. How do we do a better job of engaging with customers by understanding and predicting their behaviors? So I read a book, Dan Ariely, who's now a good friend, but Predictably Irrational. He's got really interesting nuggets of information in there, right? Like for instance, if you're trying to, on a website, trying to say, okay, here's an offer, go to Rome or go to Paris, people have a hard time deciding what they want to do. I mean, so for instance, if you have 3 offers, one offer is go to Rome, breakfast included. Another one is go to Paris, breakfast included. And third offer is Rome with no breakfast. People tend to choose Rome with breakfast because there's a comparison point, and this one seems like a more attractive offer to them. Other example he uses, which I really like, is if you go to AARP, went to lawyers and said, hey, look, can you give our senior citizens sort of legal services for $30 an hour? A lot of them said no. Then they went and asked some lawyers that, hey, are you willing to provide some legal services to senior citizens free of charge? Most of them just said yes. So what happens is there's some things that you say like, well, it doesn't really make sense, but data has shown that people are not always rational in the way they make their decisions, but very often they are predictable. So a lot of times you need to start understanding individual customers, their propensities, and make sure that you're delivering an experience, right? More and more, it is about the experience. I'll give you an example. Back in December, my niece hadn't been to New York City since she was like 7. So I said, you know what? Okay, here's the uncle's special weekend thing we're going to do. I took my 2 daughters, niece and nephew. We went to New York City. Went Saturday morning, came back Sunday night, showed them around, Broadway play, had a great time. Then, the 3 girls and a boy, we said, okay, what do you guys want to do? They want to go shopping. I said, let's go shopping. I took them to the Giorgio Armani store on 5th Avenue. That's a place where I tend to go often. And the treatment they got, the experience they walked away with, right? You get some champagne, the fragrance, all 5 senses are going to work at you. They walked out of there like fans. They said, this is a great experience. Now, that type of experience, what if you could scale it? So a lot of the companies that we're talking to now are saying that, look, I got to get customer-centric. Experience is what it's all about. There's a study we did a few weeks ago with eConsultancy. We talked to about 1,300 users, about 270 CMOs. And what we saw was 50% of the consumers we talked to had switched to brand in the past 6 months, either of the phone that they had, or the telco, or the internet service they were using at home. So, and the number one reason they cited for switching brands was the experience wasn't what they expected. So more and more, that's what companies are focusing on. How do you, this handshake that you talk about, the personal experiences that all of us get and love, how do you scale it? How do you take it online? How can we start predicting the emotions of customers, right? At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So what we're saying is, there's no more B2B, there's no more B2C, it is all C2B. The companies that will start putting customer at the core are going to end up being the winners, because every decision you make is going to be there to optimize the experience for each individual customer. And I'll talk a little bit about the how and some use cases. But what I also think is going to happen as a result of this is we're going to start humanizing the business interactions that we have with people. It is all about understanding what makes people excited, what makes people happy. It's about getting people to love what you have to offer. Because if you don't get to that point of love and excitement and advocacy, you're not going to get downstream revenue. So one of the things we looked at is, so when we did the same study with eConsultancy, right? 90% of the companies we talked to, They said, we believe understanding customers, delivering personalized experience to them is critical. That's what we're all focused on. 81% of them felt we're doing a pretty good job of delivering that experience to our customers, but 37% of the customers we talked to, about 1,350 or so, they said they're not experiencing that their brand actually understands them as individual. They're still getting spammed. I just talked to my daughter just yesterday. She got a sort of an email offer for going to a monster truck rally. And she goes like, what the hell is going on with that? Like, this is not something that I want to do. And that kind of stuff really starts to backfire. So then you start to say, why, if everyone agrees that it's all about the experience, it's all about understanding the customer, but why is there a big chasm between what brands want to do and what they're actually doing? One of the reasons, I believe, and this is like if you look at a study we did, if you look at the x-axis, this is some of the trends that are likely to impact the marketing discipline the most. And the y-axis is their level of preparedness to deal with these trends. And what you would hope is some of the trends that are going to turn the function of marketing on its head would be the trends that they would be the most prepared to deal with. But what you're seeing is the opposite of it. And that, in many ways, is part of the reason why you see this big gap. Data explosion, social media, growth of channels and device choices. Just think about how we shop, right? Things are so much more complex in today's world. How do you do attribution? How do you know which tactic is really working? Like a lot of CEOs, they say, well, half my marketing is working, I just don't know which half. That's the challenge. I mean, look at the way we do stuff. We'll do research on our laptop. We'll buy things on a mobile phone. We'll walk into a physical store to buy the product. It's really hard to deliver that consistent experience for each individual across a multitude of devices and channels that people are doing with. And again, the point I made earlier, because there is so much data, and I'll talk a little bit about algorithms, whether it's predictive analytics, whether it is cognitive algorithms. That's what a lot of the vendors and a lot of clients are looking at so they can do a better job of this. And again, there's other stats that again talk to the importance of personalization. 60% of digital commerce analytic investments will be spent on analyzing customer journeys. Really understanding all the different touch points that a customer has with your brand. So you can start mapping things out and then looking at the end outcomes to look at which journey was the most effective for the brand. I'll give some examples of that. So look, at the end of the day, the core thesis that I want to present to you is number one, understanding customers is key. Delivering experiences or engaging with customers at every touch point is real important. And the way to do that is by applying sophisticated analytics. And so you can actually personalize each interaction. And you have to get into this mindset, in many ways, DevOps. You have to take some action, you have to measure results, and you have to continually improve the overall analytics engine that you have to make it more precise and make it more accurate. And one of the things that we start to see with customers is like, our clients, is they'll say, okay, so I want to start better understanding my customers. How do I go about doing it, right? And a lot of customers will start way on the bottom, so bottom left with the descriptive data they have. Because most companies today, they have information about their customers. And they also have purchase history. So when you look at behavioral data on what people have bought, and also a little bit of information about their individual customers, where they are, where they live, sex, age, what have you, that starts to give you a fairly good base to build your analytics on top of. Right? A lot of us go into our retail store, we'll have our little card, and I mean, that's really being used for market basket analysis, right? If you buy X, you also buy Y and Z, and a lot of companies will optimize their promotional strategy based on the combination of products people are going to buy. So a lot of clients will say, you know what, let me just start with the structured data that I have, which is a combination of demographics, descriptive data, behavior data, and based upon that, I can build some models that can start giving me sort of good clues on what kind of actions I need to take for each of my sort of customer or prospect for that matter. But that's just the starting point, right? What you also have to look at is interaction data. You have to look at, I still am amazed with the companies I talk to. They've got all this data about call center records where people called in and complained about something. It's a gold mine of information about what's bothering your clients. Never gets mined. You start looking at people coming on the website, trying out different things, perhaps struggling with certain things. There's one client we worked with in fourth quarter. We found 3 sort of struggle events. And let me explain what that is. Someone comes to the website, they're learning, they're trying, they want to buy something. And for some reason, they abandon the website and leave. Now, there's lots of web analytics out there. There's Google Analytics, Omniture. There's a bunch of products that enable you to figure out where are people coming from, how long are they engaging, and why do they tend to, but they don't often tell you why they drop off, right? So one of the key things that we've been working on is giving you a little bit of qualitative feel when people leave, why do they leave? So this one client in fourth quarter, 3 use cases that we did, they were like, on one of the pages in the purchase process, when you're entering your credit card information, if you make one mistake, everything gets wiped out. So you got to start all over again. Painful. One of the reasons why people would leave. Another reason was that in a certain part of their web journey on the website, if a page took more than 20 seconds to load, the abandonment rate shot up by 70%. Those type of insights really help you understand the interaction data. Are people frustrated? Are people struggling? And then attitudinal data is also really, really important, right? So more and more companies, we call like Delta. If I call Delta, if you're ready to take a quick survey at the end of this call, say yes. Of course, I never say yes. But you people are trying to understand attitudes, right? As to how we're feeling, what's going on. They'll do market research. Social media, we're expressing a lot of information about our attitudes about certain brands. And companies are starting to tap into that a little bit. But what happens is, when you look at the top categories of interaction and attitudinal data, the data isn't structured. So it's unstructured. So you need to have understanding of language. You need to have text analytics. You need natural language processing. You need to extract sentiments. You need to understand, the different, cultures and how people express emoticons. There's a lot of algorithmic work you need to do to take some of that unstructured data, integrate it with some of your structured data down below, and then use a variety of different algorithms to build some propensity models that will start giving you some better insights on what type of conversations and engagements are likely to resonate, are likely to be more relevant. But when you start collecting a lot of this data, you start getting a sense of who your customers really are, what they are doing, how they are doing, and I think the most important part is why they are doing. That's where the attitudinal stuff comes in. And now more and more, you're having capabilities to also get some of the geofence breaches. So we carry your phones around all the time. So companies are also trying to have some relevance as to where you are. So that's the other way to start having more personalized conversations. And companies are doing this already. And I'll tell you, one of the things that we work with companies all the time is this whole notion of when you are engaging with someone, right? You could cross the line of creepiness. That you know the customer so well that now you're doing things that surprise people in a bad way. That actually backfires, right? I don't know if you guys saw that article in New York Times, maybe 2 years ago on what Target did, right? I mean, Target basically, here's a great story where a marketing person comes to a data scientist and said, hey, I know for a fact when there's a life event, people switch brands. And people are only buying a set of products from Target. I want them to buy other things for me too. So can we, using analytics and people's purchase histories and all that other stuff, can we figure out when a woman is pregnant? And scary, I mean, it's like, strangely enough, the statisticians said, well, with a high degree of confidence, a second trimester, I can figure out, that someone is pregnant. And so that's what they did. And they actually gave some offers targeting those, pregnant women to come into their store to buy, the things that they would need. But that kind of stuff can backfire on you, right? So I think one of the key things that we advocate to our customers is, at the end of the day, if you truly understand your customers, you know what type of conversations you want to have that actually add value as part of that conversation, and which ones lead you into this zone of creepiness. And in the world we live in, if people don't trust a brand, they will stop doing business with that brand in a heartbeat. So it's really important. And also when you look at individuals, when we talk to one another, if I'm really close to a friend of mine and he says something like, hey, boy, you looked really fat last night. I say, hey, that's funny. Okay, that's fine. But if somebody new I met off the street, maybe I'd take a little bit of offense, like, why are you insulting me, right? Cultures have different norms, individuals have different norms, understanding customers, so having conversations that are positive and surprising in a positive way, I think is really important. And I think the other thing we also see a lot of people do is look at all the different ways we touch a brand, right? We keep talking about Apple and how great, iPad and iPhone and all that is, right? But do you guys remember the first time you actually got an iPhone? Or better yet, an iPod? What was that packaging experience? I mean, the curved styrofoam, that whole experience was beautiful. Every conversation you had with the Apple rep was something that added equity, right? So one of the other things that what we talk to a lot of companies about is like when you start looking at all this data that you're bringing together, you're running different types of analytics on that data, and then you want to have meaningful conversations and you want to have relevant experiences at all touch points. And when you look at the way people buy, use, and get support for products, it's very different than it was 10 years ago. I don't know why, as vendors, we even write documentation and publications for how stuff works, because nobody reads it. If people really want to know how something works, they go online and they'll go to a community and they'll ask people what's going on, right? 60% of purchase decisions get made before somebody approaches a brand. So making sure that you're building preference for your brands in the conversations people are having with all the influencers is absolutely critical, way more important now than it was 10 years ago. So the way people research a product, the way they purchase a product using multi-channel that I talked about before. And one of the other trends we're seeing is, used to be people would say a call center is a cost center. So I want to move from US to India, from India to to Vietnam, from Vietnam maybe I want to move it to Africa. But now more and more companies are saying, wait a minute, this is an important touch point I have with the customer. So can I have analytics at the back end informing the call center rep to have meaningful conversations? So if someone is upset, they have a high propensity to churn, I make them whole. And if someone is actually happy with what I have, maybe I can use my call center as a revenue generating channel so I can do some cross-selling. So this whole purchase cycle, the way people are using your products is changing in a pretty radical way. So I just want to give a couple examples of the type of things that we're doing in IBM, again, partnering with some of our clients, because this is what they want to do. Things like journey analytics and journey designer. What is that? So in essence, basically what we're saying is when people have these different touch points with the brand, can we capture that? And then can we, almost like a DVR, play back the session that segments of people had? So what you see with journey analytics, with the streams that you're seeing, basically tells you that, okay, you can define the beginning and ending of a journey. Ending of a journey could be somebody actually bought something. Or ending of a journey could be someone actually registered, because I want to get people to register with me. You could define the beginning of the journey to be 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. But what the algorithms do is figure out what were the journeys that people took. So you could look for the shortest journey. You could look for the most profitable journey. You could look for the journey with the fewest touch points. But what you could do is almost play back those journeys for those right segments, and then you could pick up the journey that you think is ideal given your business objectives, and you could pop it into the tool that we call Journey Designer, which basically then automates or puts that into operation going forward. Things like that is what people want to do. Then when you look at this other thing, we announced a big alliance with Apple last year. So the whole point of the Apple relationship, Apple said, look, we know how to build these devices, and we know how to deliver an outstanding experience. We would like to see more iPads and iPhones getting used in a business context. So we came along and said, hey, look, that's one thing we understand. Large companies by industry. So collectively, we've been building applications, and this understanding the customer is a core aspect of that. So this example is a retail store associate sales assistant. So when you walk in, imagine you walk into a brick and mortar store, right? Why can't you have somewhat a similar experience like when you have online, when you go to Amazon, you get product recommendations based on what you've bought and based on others like you. But in this instance, if you're standing in front of a sort of a clothing aisle, you can have someone walk up to you with an iPad in hand and basically have a conversation. So say, what are you looking for? Looking for this blue shirt. 15 and a half, 16 size? Yep, look it up real quick. You know what? So happens we don't have this in stock, but let me make some recommendations on other things that may also resonate with you. Those we do have in stock. Just imagine the conversations you can start to have, and you can say, by the way, people who are buying this particular piece are also buying these other products. Or if you really got your heart set on the product that we don't have in stock, let me see where else it exists, and we can have it delivered to you overnight, or it's like 2 miles away. But you can start having more personalized conversations, let alone the checkout like what you see Apple if you go to an Apple store. But this is just one example in a retail perspective. But there's another one. So if you look at financial services with wealth management, when people come and talk about wealth management, rarely do they factor in all the circumstances that are happening in your world. And that's another thing that's starting to change. So when you have the consultative conversation with a wealth advisor, you can have more meaningful conversations. The other thing that we're also working on is bringing a lot of these analytics to merchandisers. Because think about merchandisers that are trying to run an e-commerce site. A lot of people today are still relying on reports that come out once a week to figure out what is moving and why. But imagine getting real-time insights on which products are selling, how much inventory you have left over. Maybe you stop promoting something that you're going to run out of stock pretty soon. Those type of insights you can start getting in real time. There's one other example that I want to share with you, which comes around Watson. So one of the key things that we've been putting a lot of focus on is, in addition to predictive analytics, there's this notion of cognitive analytics, which is computers understanding human language, recommending decisions, and then learning as they go. The computer never forgets. In fact, it gets smarter and smarter over time. And we decided to apply analytics in a big way to healthcare because we saw the opportunity there to be just incredible. If you look at physicians, the amount of data that they have, the ability to even absorb, they can't keep up with all the latest literature and publications. And if you got a computer that understands the language, you could teach it oncology. So we have targeted that at cancer research and seeing some really good results. This is an example of how we're using Watson Analytics in a commerce type environment. So in this quick 2-minute video, what I'll show you is a scenario where you've got some data, you upload it into the IBM cloud, and you want to now start asking questions. Questions using English language like, I want to know about customer lifetime value. I want to know, and this is an insurance use case, so I want to know, like by state, where am I seeing the type of claims and how many people are like responding to the offers that I'm making. But let me just quickly run that for you. It's nothing fancy, but you're just seeing someone going to work. You pick a file, you upload it into the IBM cloud here, and now Watson is what's running in the cloud in this instance that's structuring all this data. So when you start asking questions using natural language, it can start giving you some insights. So it's telling you claims amount by state in this instance. And if you also want to know the number of responses, how they compare by the renew offer type, it can start looking for that type of insights as well. So one of the theses that we have is it's not that people don't want to use advanced analytics to be more effective in their jobs and to understand and serve their customers better, but it's just hard. You need a lot of data scientists. There's only so many of them. So now you saw like an example of how using the data that you upload, using English language, Watson can tell you some insights that you're looking for. But what if you could also start predicting some things? Like we talked about customer lifetime value. Well, which attributes are predictors towards a customer lifetime value? So there's this element of also doing predictive analytics using the same highly intuitive interface. So in predictive analytics, you have to first basically identify which variable or which field you want the system to predict. So that's what you're doing here. And what you see is the system actually came up with 3 different insights on what predicts lifetime value of a customer. And what's interesting, in this instance, upon three things. It says people who have the most policies tend to be most profitable. Makes sense? The people who tend to drive high-end vehicles tend to be more profitable. Makes sense? The third insight that the system found, which was a little counterintuitive, those who get the most basic level of insurance coverage are the most profitable lifetime. Why? Because they tend to have fewer claims. Reason unknown, but that's an insight. So what you can do is then you could look at decision trees so you understand the why. Because at the end of the day, you don't want these analytics to be a black box that you just punch it in and you get a number. But here it tells you like the whole decision tree, it tells you what led up to those type of conclusions. And then you could also structure these visualizations in a way that appeals to you. So look, at the end of the day, whether it's predictive, whether it's cognitive algorithms, they are helping individuals do their jobs better. Companies like Celcom, this is the largest telco operator in Malaysia, 180 million subscribers. They can actually find out if someone is not using up their weekend minutes and make offers to them to download their movies on the weekend. So they're getting the most out of their subscription. Banorte, a bank that is actually 20 million users they have in Mexico, they've turned their business model on their head. Instead of thinking of their business as a portfolio of offerings, they're thinking of their business as a portfolio of individuals or customers. High net worth people, different approach. People who are retired, people who are just starting out, different approach, and they're seeing great results. Homebase, this is another company in UK, and basically what they wanted to do is understand the intent of the individuals that were searching for certain things, and also understand the catalog that a vendor wanted to actually, that they have. But what you do is when somebody clicks on a link after doing a Google search, you build up a website on the fly that's teeing up the things that they're likely to be interested in. So there's examples like this all over the place, and I just want to basically end with sort of the way that I started, which is, we're moving to a world where customers are now more in control. And the experiences that brands deliver to these individuals is going to determine whether they become advocates, and when they start actually talking about the experiences they've had. And those companies that do not take the time to understand their customers, they're the ones at the greatest amount of risk. So that's basically what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much for your time. I know you guys are ready to have some cocktails and wine and champagne. Maybe I could take a quick question if there is one. Yeah.
Would you recommend that Target predict the pregnancy of its customers?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I would say that in most instances, getting that level of personal information using analytics gets you into this world of creepiness no matter what you do. So I think you got it. It's like with great analytics and insights also comes great responsibility, because if you don't end up being very cautious with it, it can really backfire on you, which happened in the case of Target. Okay, well, I'll be around for a couple more minutes if you guys want to have some more questions, but thank you very much. Always a pleasure.